Get that child away from me, he's ruining the pictures. Vanessa's voice sliced through the wedding hall like a blade. Guests turned. Cameras froze. The bride, shimmering in sequins, glared at Ethan, 7 years old, bow tie crooked, clutching a battered red toy car like it was his last shield on earth. Margaret Collins, 60, spine bent not by age but by decades of sacrifice, rose halfway from her chair. He's just a boy. Her voice was calm, too calm, like a violin string pulled to breaking. Vanessa didn't blink. Then teach him how to act his age. Or keep him under the table where he belongs. Gasps rippled. Daniel, the groom, pretended not to hear. He raised his champagne to another guest, laughing too loud, like if he laughed enough, the poison in his new wife's words would evaporate. Ethan's knuckles whitened around his toy car. His lip trembled, but no sound came out. He pressed closer to Margaret, burying his face in the folds of her dark green dress. Margaret's jaw locked. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She let the insult land on her like ash from a fire that had been burning for years. Her fingers stroked Ethan's hair once, steady, deliberate, signaling, I see you. You matter. But Vanessa wasn't finished. She leaned in, voice sharp enough to cut the linen. You know what people are saying, Margaret? That Daniel should have banned you from this wedding. That you drag sorrow into every room you enter. And look, she pointed a manicured nail at Ethan, you've poisoned him with it too. Margaret's teeth ground against each other until her jaw ached. The urge to strike back surged up her throat like bile. Instead, she inhaled, slow, heavy, suffocating. Silence from her lips. Thunder in her chest. The hall didn't come to her defense. Eyes darted, whispers flitted, but no one moved. Respect had shifted, power tilted toward the glittering bride. The old woman with the brown skin and silver hair was furniture in their eyes. Outdated. Disposable. Lucy, Margaret's adopted daughter, sat 3 chairs down. Her hands twitched on the tablecloth. Her eyes screamed, say something. But she swallowed it. The weight of the moment pressed her tongue flat. Daniel finally approached, smile still plastered, a mask cracking at the edges. Vanessa, he murmured, tugging her arm. Not here. She pulled free, voice rising again. If she wants to sit at my table, she can learn her place. The last word detonated. Place? Like Margaret was a stray animal allowed in only by mercy. Ethan flinched. Margaret steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. Her nails dug into her own palm to stop the shaking. The humiliation wasn't hers alone now, it dripped into the boy's bones, planting seeds of shame. And yet, she held. She always held. Years of burying her daughter, raising Ethan alone, standing in courtrooms where no one remembered her name, she had learned to choke down contempt like bitter medicine. But tonight was different. Tonight, the venom wasn't aimed only at her. It was aimed at the child she'd sworn to guard. Her pulse hammered. She whispered to Ethan, stay strong, my love. But the boy's eyes, wide and glassy, begged a question she couldn't answer, why does no one stop her? The music resumed. Laughter restarted. Guests chose comfort over courage. Vanessa flipped her hair and smiled for another camera flash, as if nothing had been said. Margaret sat back down, spine rigid. The battle wasn't finished, it had only shifted into silence. And inside that silence, a storm was brewing, coiling tighter with every heartbeat. Her dignity had been shredded. Ethan's innocence bruised. And though Margaret's lips remained sealed, her resolve hardened into stone. This was the night humiliation set the stage for reckoning. Margaret's smile never reached her eyes. She lowered them to the half-empty plate, fork untouched. Her hand hovered above the silverware, stiff, fingers curled as if she might crush it. Inside, the humiliation burned like acid. Drag sorrow into every room. Learn your place. Vanessa's words carved themselves into her bones. She glanced at Ethan. The boy sat frozen, red toy car clutched so tightly his knuckles gleamed white. His head bowed, but his little shoulders quivered like a bird caught in a storm. "Eat, sweetheart," Margaret whispered, voice steady. Her throat, though, felt scraped raw. Ethan didn't move. His silence was heavier than the music, heavier than the laughter rolling from the other end of the hall. His silence said, "Grandma, we're not welcome here." Margaret straightened, spine locked. She would not bow. She had faced hospital corridors, graveyard dirt, unpaid bills stacked like bricks against her chest. A sneer from a jeweled bride? That would not break her. Still, her teeth dug into her lip until the taste of iron filled her mouth. Rage begged to escape. But what would happen if she unleashed it here, on her son's wedding day, in front of Ethan, in front of the guests who already whispered that she was a burden? Her silence was not weakness. It was armor. Lucy's hand touched hers under the table. Warm, trembling, urgent. Margaret turned. Lucy's eyes brimmed with a fury she dared not speak. "You don't deserve this," Lucy mouthed, almost soundless. Margaret's chest tightened. For a moment, she wanted to lean into that comfort, to let someone else carry the weight. But no, this was her cross. Her grandson's eyes were watching. She had to teach him something stronger than bitterness. So she did what she had done for 60 years. She held her ground and absorbed the blow. Vanessa laughed again across the room, her voice sharp against the crystal clinking. Margaret's hands curled in her lap. Her nails cut crescents into her palms. She forced herself to breathe evenly, each inhale dragging against the tight band around her ribs. Her body screamed to fight, but her soul whispered patience. She remembered Maria, her late daughter, Ethan's mother. "Dignity, Mom," Maria used to say. "We fight, but we never crawl." Those words steadied her now. Ethan peeked up at her, eyes shimmering with questions. Margaret touched his cheek, gentle, deliberate. "We're okay," she mouthed. But in her chest, she knew it wasn't true. Tonight had crossed a line. Vanessa hadn't just insulted her. She had crushed Ethan in front of a room full of witnesses, and no one had lifted a finger. Something in Margaret shifted, quiet but irrevocable. The silence she carried was no longer just survival. It was the gathering of a storm. She swallowed the insult, but she vowed, tonight would be the last time she let them treat her, or Ethan, as less than human. The blade had been planted. The reckoning would come. "Grandma, don't look under the table." Ethan's whisper sliced through Margaret like glass. His tiny fingers clamped her wrist, trembling. His face, drained of color, was the face of a child who had just seen a ghost. Her pulse hammered. She bent down, heart ricocheting in her chest. The white linen brushed her cheek as she lifted it. Underneath, folded into a tight square, lay a note. She snatched it with shaking fingers, unfolded it, and read. "Table 6. Add shrimp to the boys' plate." Her breath caught. Ethan's allergy. One bite, his throat would close. One bite, he'd die in front of everyone. Her jaw locked so hard it ached. She looked at Ethan. The boy's eyes flooded with tears he refused to let fall. He pressed his lips together, trembling like a cornered animal. The ballroom blurred. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, it all turned to static. Only the paper burned in her hand. Vanessa's voice rang out across the hall. "Smile, everyone. Tonight is about joy." Champagne sloshed in her glass as she raised it high. Margaret's vision tunneled. Rage boiled like lava, but grief sat on top of it, heavy, suffocating. They wanted Ethan erased. They wanted her erased. Lucy leaned in, eyes sharp as knives. "What is it?" Margaret crushed the note in her fist. Her hand shook, but her voice was steady, forged in steel. They tried to kill him. Lucy's breath caught. Her gaze darted toward Vanessa, then back to Ethan, who now buried his face into Margaret's arm. For 60 years, Margaret had swallowed slights, endured whispers, survived storms. But this was no insult. This was an attack. Something inside her snapped. The quiet endurance she had lived by shattered, leaving only raw determination. She stood. The chair screeched across the floor, loud enough to silence the closest tables. Dozens of eyes turned. She didn't care. Ethan clung to her hand. Lucy rose too, protective, watchful. Margaret's spine straightened, taller than she'd felt in years. She walked, each step thunder in her chest, each breath a vow. Vanessa's laughter carried across the ballroom, brittle and false. Margaret stopped halfway, turned back to Ethan, and knelt. She cupped his face, voice low but fierce. "You will not be broken. Not while I breathe." Then she rose and faced the glittering hall. Her voice cracked like a whip, sharp and cold. "Who put this note beneath my grandson's chair?" The music stopped. Forks froze midair. Vanessa's smile faltered, just a hairline crack, but Margaret saw it. And in that silence, Margaret made her decision. No more submission. No more swallowing pain. From tonight on, she would drag the truth into the light, no matter the cost. Her dignity was no longer enough. She would fight. Wedding crumbled around her like glass, but Margaret walked out of that ballroom with her grandson's hand clenched in hers and a fire she hadn't felt in decades. The next morning, she didn't cry. She didn't hide. She opened the old cedar trunk in her bedroom, the one she hadn't touched in 20 years. Inside lay the fragments of a life most of her family didn't even know existed. Certificates. Photos. Newspaper clippings. A leather-bound journal with her name in faded gold, Margaret Ellison, J.D. Because before she was grandma, before she was the quiet woman pouring coffee at Thanksgiving, she had been one of the first women in her county to pass the bar. She had defended victims of corporate negligence, exposing scandals no one else dared touch. She had earned scars in courtrooms where men twice her size tried to silence her, and she won. But when her husband fell ill, she'd walked away from all of it. She traded gavels for casseroles, depositions for bedtime stories. The world forgot. Her children forgot. Even Alex, her own son, dismissed her as fragile, outdated. Yet that steel never left her bones. And now, as she read that poisonous note again, the old Margaret stirred. Lucy found her at the kitchen table, papers spread around like war maps. "Grandma, what are you doing?" Margaret didn't look up. Her glasses slid to the tip of her nose, eyes locked on an old article, Attorney Ellison exposes food safety scandal, CEO indicted. Her voice was calm, but edged with iron. "I'm preparing. If they want war, they'll get it." Lucy's jaw tightened. She had grown up admiring Margaret but never knew the full scope of her fire. "You're not alone," she said, her tone steady. "If Vanessa thinks she can bury you with her money and charm, she's wrong. We'll show her." For the first time in days, Margaret smiled, not soft, but sharp. "Vanessa underestimates us. That's her first mistake. Her second will be thinking the truth can be hidden." She folded the note, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and tucked it inside a file marked evidence. Ethan peeked in, his toy car clutched in his small hands. His voice trembled. "Grandma, are they gonna try again?" Margaret knelt, steadying her breath before answering. She cupped his cheek, eyes blazing. "They tried once, and failed. They'll never get another chance. Not while I stand." Behind her, sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating the scattered documents. It wasn't just paper, it was ammunition. Proof that she wasn't just a grandmother clinging to dignity. She was a warrior who had once toppled giants. And she was ready to do it again. 2 days later, Margaret walked into the downtown courthouse with her cane tapping against the marble floor. Not as a broken woman, but as a witness. She was carrying the folded shrimp note, sealed in a clear evidence pouch. She hadn't stepped inside this building in decades, yet the smell of paper and polish hit her like an old memory. She could almost hear the echoes of her younger self hammering objections, forcing guilty men to stutter on the stand. A voice cut through the buzz of the hall. "Margaret Ellison? I'll be damned." She turned. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a navy suit stood frozen mid-step. Judge Robert Hayes, once a rookie prosecutor who had shadowed her during a messy corporate trial. Now, one of the most respected judges in the state. For a moment, time folded. He wasn't the judge, he was the nervous 20-something kid she had once told, "If you want justice, don't blink." Robert broke into a grin. "You saved my career once. Don't tell me you're back in the ring." Margaret's lips tightened into a smirk. "I never left. I just changed arenas." She held up the evidence pouch. His expression shifted. He leaned closer, reading the words scrawled in ink, "Table 8, add shrimp to the child serving." His jaw clenched. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "This was at your son's wedding?" Margaret nodded. "My grandson. Severe allergy. Someone wanted him gone." Robert exhaled, steadying himself. Then he looked at her the way men look at generals returning to the battlefield. "Do you know who?" "I have suspects," she said, her voice low and steady. "And I'll need someone who still remembers that truth matters." His hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of respect. "You stood by me when I was nobody. Now it's my turn. I'll help you." The words hit like a gavel. An ally. A powerful one. Lucy, who had been hovering nearby, watched with wide eyes. "Grandma, he knows you?" Robert chuckled. "Knows her? Kid, this woman taught me how to fight. Half the reason I'm a judge is because I saw her tear down men twice her size in that courtroom." Margaret's gaze sharpened. "Then you know I don't bluff. This note is just the beginning. There's more. And when the time comes, I want this case brought to light, no favors, no cover-ups." Robert's grin faded into solemn agreement. "Then you'll have it. But Margaret, if the person behind this is who I think it is, you're not just walking into a family scandal. You're stepping into a war." Margaret slipped the pouch back into her file. "Good. Wars are where the truth belongs." Lucy exhaled. Ethan tugged on Margaret's sleeve, eyes wide with awe, though he didn't fully understand. To him, she wasn't just grandma anymore. She was someone bigger. For the first time since the wedding, Margaret felt it too. She wasn't standing in shame. She was standing in power. And the world was about to remember her name. The family gathered again that weekend, not in celebration, but in damage control. Alex had called everyone into the Ellison living room, desperate for answers, desperate for calm. Margaret sat at the head of the table, silent, hands folded, silver hair catching the afternoon light. Ava strutted in late, her heels clicking like daggers on wood, her smile painted on as though nothing had happened. "Are we really still entertaining this nonsense?" she scoffed, tossing her purse on the couch. "A wrinkled note, some paranoia, and suddenly I'm a villain?" Margaret didn't flinch. Her eyes fixed on Ava like steel. "Sit down." The command was so sharp it cut through the room. Even Ava froze for a heartbeat before forcing a laugh. "Excuse me? You don't. Sit down." The air tightened. Alex rubbed his temples. Lucy sat forward, protective hand resting near Ethan's shoulder. Ava, seething, lowered herself onto a chair. Margaret placed the evidence pouch on the table. Her voice, calm but lethal, sliced every syllable. "I know exactly what was planned. I know who gave the note to the waiter. And before you try to spin another lie, understand this, I am not the fragile old woman you think I am. Gasps rippled across the room. For decades, Margaret had worn the mask of a quiet retiree, a grandmother who spent her days tending roses and baking pies. Now she tore it off. I was once the lead federal prosecutor in this state. My cases put CEOs in prison, shut down cartels, and exposed men who thought they were untouchable. She leaned forward, eyes burning. I've tried murderers with less arrogance than you. Ava's smirk faltered. Her knuckles whitened around the armrest. Alex's jaw dropped. Mom, you never told me. Margaret cut him off with a raised hand. Because it was never about me. It was about protecting this family. But now you need to understand, I know how to uncover a lie. And I know how to end one. She pulled out a folder, slid photographs and documents across the table, financial transfers, phone records, a testimony already signed by the waiter. Each page landed with the weight of a hammer. Ava's face drained of color. This is insane, she hissed. You can't prove. I don't need to prove, Margaret said, voice icy. The truth already speaks. And when Judge Hayes sees this, when the district attorney files charges, you'll understand what it means to underestimate me. For the first time, Ava had no words. Her lips parted, but nothing came. Margaret stood, her green dress flowing like a banner of defiance. She pressed her hand to her chest, but this time it wasn't pain, it was resolve. Her declaration thundered through the room. I will not let anyone, not you, not anyone, try to destroy my grandson. You tried to poison this family, but hear me now, the Ellisons will not break. We will rise. And when the truth burns you down, it will be your own fire. The silence that followed was crushing. Alex stared at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Lucy's eyes gleamed with pride. Ethan squeezed her hand, whispering, Grandma's not afraid. No, she wasn't. Margaret Ellison had just declared war. The news spread like wildfire. Guests who had once whispered behind champagne glasses were now gossiping openly. The bride tried to poison the groom's son. The Ellison name, once polished and untouchable, was suddenly hanging on the edge of ruin. Ava fought back the only way she knew how, with venom. She went to the press first, her face powdered, her tears staged. This is elder abuse, she cried into cameras. A bitter old woman with fading relevance is inventing conspiracies to sabotage her son's happiness. Clips went viral. Headlines screamed, ex-prosecutor grandma loses grip on reality? Margaret watched it all unfold from her living room, jaw set, her phone buzzing with messages from reporters demanding a statement. Every word Ava spat to the media was another knife, each headline designed to isolate her, to paint her as unstable. Alex stormed in, voice raw. Mom, she's destroying us. Half the company board called me this morning asking if you've lost your mind. Margaret didn't raise her voice. She simply opened her folder again, tapping the documents with steady fingers. Evidence doesn't care about headlines. The truth cuts deeper than any smear. But Ava wasn't finished. She filed a restraining order, claiming Margaret was harassing her, claiming Lucy was jealous and violent. Court papers arrived on their doorstep like bombs. Suddenly, Margaret was no longer just defending her family, she was defending her own freedom, her dignity, her very place in her grandson's life. Lucy raged. She's turning it all against us. If the court believes her, Ethan could be taken away, Alex's career destroyed. Margaret raised a hand. Her voice was quiet, but lethal, calm. We don't fight fire with panic. We fight it with precision. Still, at night, alone in her room, Margaret felt the danger claw at her chest. She was 60, her body wasn't what it used to be, and the media circus made her feel like the walls were closing in. For the first time, she allowed herself to whisper, what if I lose? What if they take Ethan from me? The thought of her grandson, small hand clutching hers in fear, fueled her rage. She slammed the thought down. No. Not again. I've faced worse. She will not win. But Ava escalated again. She bribed a journalist, leaked doctored messages to frame Lucy as obsessed with Alex and mentally unstable. Social media lit up, #ProtectAva trending, strangers calling Margaret a jealous crone. The danger wasn't abstract anymore. Reputation, custody, even safety, all under siege. Then came the call. A masked voice, distorted but unmistakably male, "Drop the case, Mrs. Ellison. Or next time, it won't just be shrimp on the menu." The phone slipped from her hand. This wasn't just smear tactics anymore. This was a war, and now they were willing to spill blood. Margaret looked in the mirror, staring at the reflection of a woman Ava had tried to reduce to fragile grandma. What she saw instead was a fighter, a survivor, a prosecutor reborn. She whispered, teeth clenched, "You want war? You've got one." The ballroom was full again, this time not for celebration, but for confrontation. Alex had called a family assembly after relentless pressure, and Margaret insisted it be public. "If we keep hiding, she wins," she said. Cameras rolled, journalists packed the aisles, and the entire town waited for blood. Ava entered first, draped in designer silk, crocodile tears shimmering under the flashes. She clutched Alex's arm like a prize she was entitled to keep. "This is harassment," she declared loudly, making sure every mic caught it. "I will not be slandered by a bitter woman jealous of my happiness." Margaret didn't waste a word. She simply placed a stack of papers on the table at center stage. "This," she said, voice slicing through the murmurs, "is the truth." The documents were brutal, the anonymous catering order slips, handwriting analysis matching Ava's notes, bank transfers to a consultant who turned out to be the masked caller traced back to a burner phone she purchased. Each piece of evidence hit like a hammer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A reporter shouted, "Are you saying she tried to poison your grandson?" Margaret's reply was ice, "I'm not saying it. The evidence is." Ava tried to laugh it off, voice shrill. "Fabricated. She's desperate, can't you see? She—" "Play the footage," Margaret cut in. On the projector, security camera clips flickered to life. Ava's sister, trembling, handing the folded note to a waiter. Ava's hand moments earlier, slipping it across the table. The timestamp. The clarity. The undeniable proof. The room went dead silent. Then Lucy stood, holding Ethan close, her voice breaking but strong. "This woman put a child's life at risk. On his father's wedding day. If this is love, then love has become poison." Ava's mask shattered. She lunged forward, screaming at her sister, at the waiters, at Margaret. "Liars! All of you! Alex, tell them it's not true." But Alex's face said it all. His hand shook as he dropped her arm. "Ava," he whispered, voice gutted, "how could you?" The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted over each other, guests gasped in horror, relatives shook their heads. Ava's crocodile tears turned to rage. She tried to bolt, but two hotel security guards stepped in front of her. "You can't arrest me," she shrieked. Margaret's voice cut her off, calm and lethal, "No one has to. You already destroyed yourself." Alex looked at his mother, his son, his adoptive sister. Then he looked at Ava, cornered and trembling. His voice carried across the room, "This marriage is over." A single sentence, and Ava collapsed into her chair, mascara running, the weight of her own schemes crushing her. For the first time, Margaret felt her chest loosen. The truth wasn't just whispered anymore. It roared, undeniable, unshakable, and Ava had finally faced her reckoning. The dust settled, but the echoes of truth remained. Ava was gone, escorted out of the ballroom under a storm of flashing cameras and murmurs of disgust. Her perfect smile, once her greatest weapon, was now her greatest humiliation. But for the Collins family, the story didn't end with her defeat. Margaret stood tall, though her legs trembled from exhaustion. She wasn't just a grandmother protecting her grandson anymore, she had become the living proof that dignity, even at 60, could dismantle deceit built on youth and beauty. As she looked around the silent hall, she knew something had shifted forever. Alex walked to her slowly, his face hollowed by betrayal but lit by something stronger, clarity. He bent down before his son. "Ethan, I failed you. But from this day forward, I swear, no one will ever make you feel unsafe again." His words cracked, but they carried the weight of redemption. Ethan's little arms wrapped tightly around his father's neck, as if sealing a new vow between them. Lucy, silent until then, placed a hand on Margaret's shoulder. Her eyes, once dimmed by doubt, now burned with resolve. "Family isn't about who pretends the loudest," she said, her voice firm. "It's about who stands when everything else falls apart." Margaret squeezed her hand in agreement, pride swelling in her chest. The wedding guests, once complicit in their silence, began to speak. An uncle stood, clearing his throat. "Margaret, tonight you showed us something most of us forget, that courage doesn't come from power or wealth. It comes from love." Others nodded, and a soft ripple of applause spread, growing louder until it filled the room. Not applause for spectacle, but for truth. In the weeks that followed, the scandal spread across town. Neighbors whispered about Ava's downfall, but what lingered most was admiration for Margaret. Her story reached beyond her family. At the community center, other grandparents confided in her about their own battles, their own silences. Teachers at Ethan's school praised her for shielding a boy who might have been destroyed by negligence. Even strangers mailed letters, saying her courage gave them strength. Margaret never sought to be a hero, yet that's exactly what she became. Not because she shouted the loudest, but because she stood firm when it mattered most. Months later, at a small Sunday gathering, Ethan tugged at her sleeve, holding a kite Lucy had helped him build. "Grandma," he said with a grin that finally reached his eyes, "will you fly it with me?" Margaret nodded, her heart swelling with a peace she thought she'd never feel again. As the kite soared against the wide blue sky, she whispered to herself, "Truth always finds the wind." The lesson was clear, and it spread far beyond one fractured wedding. Real family is chosen through loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. And the legacy Margaret left wasn't just for Ethan or Alex, but for anyone who had ever been silenced. Stand, speak, and protect what truly matters. At its heart, this story reminds us that true family is not built on appearances, but on love, courage, and the willingness to protect each other at any cost. What do you think about Margaret's choice to stand up for Ethan? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to defend someone you love? I'd love to hear your thoughts and personal stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next story.